After a long break in the rules that we've been going through from ʿUmdatul Fiqh, going through Kitab al-Buyu', the chapter of the buying and selling, we have now reached what we want to discuss regarding the ahkam of the Dayn. So the chapter is pertaining to the Dayn, the debt and the loan. So we discussed previously the loans itself and how the loan should be fulfilled and how it should be given. And that no doubt is something which is a matter of deen and a matter that is encouraged within the sunnah. And essentially, when we mentioned the Dayn, when we mentioned the loan, we mentioned that upon the individual is to give back that commodity either same or better than it. So when you return something, you should return it in the same way or better than it. Why, when mentioned here, why does it not just mention return the same commodity back? Why is the question clear? Why does it not mention just return back the same commodity in the same condition? No.
Sometimes you don't have it exactly the same.
Why?
Like a car part, maybe you put it inside a car.
Okay, so yes, so it's possible that you cannot return the exact same thing. No. Car part's a good example. What else? Paying in installments. Like what, for example? If you borrow £100, when you return £100 back? Sah? No. What other scenario can it be where you take something and you don't return that exact same quantity back? مثله؟ نعم. يفسد أكيد. أيوة. أو أكل. نعم. صح. So, for example, it's perishable. So, food. So, for example, now someone says, I'm going to give you this food, this perishable product. So then you return it. You're not going to give them back the exact same thing. So, if, for example, they're fruits, and the person gives you the fruits, now it doesn't now mean that he's going to return the exact same fruits back, because obviously after time, it's not going to be anywhere near the same condition. But you return it back in the condition that you took it. So basically, say, for example, you took a kilo of apples, for example. But it's a point to return those kilo of apples to the person. You're not going to return the exact same kilo, especially if a time has elapsed. But you return him a kilo of apples, that are going to be like that or better than that. Does that make sense? And of course, when you have the narration itself, the hadith, where the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commanded Rafi' to return what? Remember. It wasn't armor in this case. الدرع الإبل the camel. So he commands to return the camel. Now it was from the best of the camels. So in this scenario, he returned the camel again, because cattle could be regarded as being from the perishable goods. Now the commodities that are perishable. Why? Because of course they age. Cattle is going to age, and then when it ages, it's going to be of better or worse quality, depending on what stage of life it's at. Now, so what is upon the individuals that he returns those goods in the same manner. So also what we mentioned as well in relation to the Dayn or the qard, the loan which is given, is that it is returned how? It's returned, or rather we said it's returned, but what cannot be done alongside it? Now, so you cannot now do some form of favor or service alongside that loan. Why?
Ribā.
It's considered to be riba. It's considered to be a riba in usury. Why? Because now you have, for example, you give someone £1,000 loan. Naam. And then the person, they in order to repay that loan, not only is it upon them to repay £1,000 as the loan, but also he says, but you need to give me a lift to work every day. Naam. So now what is he repaying? He's not just repaying the money, the cash, but he's also repaying with a manfa'a, with some form of benefit, service. So now he's repaying more than he gave. Naam, he's repaying more than he gave. So this now is regarded as being a riba. We also mentioned that within the same discussion as well, it's riba not just if the person does it, but also الذي كتب قصدك الربا يعني؟ نعم. We're saying نعم, of course, if anyone wrote it down or witnessed it, and then this is regarded as being they've entered into the riba as well. But what we mean, what else? No. Expectation. نعم, قصده يعني يتوقع. So if he expects it, so he expects now that the person is going to give them something in return. So I've lent you the £1,000, but I expect you to drop me to work every day. Just that mere expectation enters into this matter of riba. Now, just as, for example, use the same example, a person was to lend £1,000 to an individual, and he expects 1,100 back. That mere expectation is also regarded as entering into this matter of riba. Now, not just if he does it or not. Because now, if he does it and he accepts it, then who's athim? Who's blameworthy? If he does it and he accepts it, both of them. If now he expects it, but the person doesn't do it, then who's athim? Who's blameworthy? The one expecting it, the creditor, the one that has given the loan. Does that make sense, Barakallah Feekum? So this is what we were discussing, just some of these things in relation to this matter of the riba and the qard, the loan. Then we mentioned here, or Ibn Qudāmah here mentions from the ahkām of the dayn, rulings in relation to the dayn. And so he mentions some of the rulings here, and within those rulings, he mentions this matter of al-ḥajr. So he mentions it within this, al-ḥajr, with a ha and not a ha. Naam, al-ḥajr, obviously different from hajr. And so within some of the books of fiqh, al-ḥajr is mentioned yani separately. And within this, he's mentioned it within the discussion of the loan itself. We'll discuss it further, inshallah. And so he mentions, raḥimahullah, he begins, raḥimahullah, by mentioning, man lazimahu ad-dayn mu'ajjilun lam yutalab bihi qabla ajli. And so, whoever, now the debt, so whoever is upon the debt at a specific time, it's a specific time, it cannot be requested from him before its time. It cannot be requested from him before its time. So if there has been an appointed time for when the debt is going to be repaid, this cannot now be requested for him before that time. So, and quite simply, this is because it's not something which is upon him at that time. Quite simply, it's not an obligation upon him at that time to pay that back, that debt. So it cannot now be sought from him or expected from him. Now, just on a point of caution here, this is why it's important that if a person needs the money at a particular time, it's important that they stipulate this. And they don't enter into mushakil, yani issues and problems thereafter, where they really need it at this particular time, but because it's not stipulated, they may not receive that money back or receive what they've loaned back at that time. And so it's important to stipulate this if needed at a particular time. وَلَمْ يَهْجَرْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْلِهِ. And so with that as well, he cannot now demand that this is taken from this individual, or the person is restricted before its time has elapsed. So for example, now a person owes another individual, again same example, £1,000. A person owes one individual £1,000. And then with that, he states that because you owe me this money and you haven't paid me back, that I'm going to seek, for example, the Qadi, that he restricts your payments, he restricts your spending until you pay me back. Now, this is essentially what is ḥajr, where a person's money is being, or their payments are going to be restricted. Now, and generally this is done by the Qadi, by the judge. So, but a person cannot do that if the payment isn't due. He cannot now stipulate as if the payment is not due. ولا بموته نعم ولم يحل بتفليسه ولا بموته إذا وثقه الورثة بالرهن أو كفيل. Likewise as well, it cannot now be said that if a person becomes bankrupt, that this now means that the debt is due. So just because of someone's bankruptcy does not now mean that the debt is due, nor by way of their death. Is that clear, Barakallahu Feekum? So what it means essentially is that if the money has been lent, and now they say, for example, we're going to lend you this money until the end of Ramadan, and then between now and then the person becomes bankrupt. The person cannot now say, because in light of your bankruptcy, you need to pay me back now. Naam. Or the person say, or for example, the person passes away, and then the individual goes to the family and says, well, in light of Fulan's death, we need that debt paid back now. Now, especially now, if we have the scenario where, especially when we're talking about the death, for example, that those who inherit from the individual, they now assume that debt. So they are now individuals that assume that debt, or they ascribe that debt to some form of collateral. Now, so they assure the individual, the debtor, the one that's owed the money, that they will receive the money as long as, or that they place some form of collateral to that. So they say, for example, you're owed this £1,000, and Fulan is passed away. However, this is when you want to be paid back. You want to be paid back on the 20th of Ramadan, for example. Now, we're going to attach that debt to this particular commodity. So, for example, there's a car, and that debt now is ascribed to the car, for example. In failing that debt, that cash to be paid back, then you take the car. Now, this is what can be said in light of the person's death. If the person is done so, it does so. Or the individual says, in failure, now I am now the wakil of this individual's debt. Now I'm taking on this person's debt to some extent. So now in the scenario where this debt has not been fulfilled or paid, then it will be taken upon such individual from those that are inheritors. Now, and so this essentially this is the ruling in that regard. However, as we understand, a person's debt, if they are able at the point of death, for example, if they are able to pay it back, then they should pay it back. Now they should pay it back as soon as possible, because these are from the things that should be paid, at the point of a person's death. Not that it's an obligation that is paid. Now, is that clear? I mean, Bāb al-Fadl, from the virtue and what's better is that the person pays that debt back. Because you mentioned that with the wealth of the individual, and we discussed this in Bāb al-Janāza, when we discussed the janā'iz. We discussed that the person's wealth, there are 5 things that are done with that person's wealth. Now, at the point of their death, and they remember what they are, and they come in order. So the first thing is that the money is used for their janazah. Debts. Now, so يعني ad-Dayn fi dhimma, so debts that are upcoming. So it might be, example, outstanding bills. Next, the waṣiyyah. So then that's up to what? How much of the person's wealth? A thuluth, 1/3 of the person's wealth. So up to 1/3 of a person's wealth is used as a waṣiyyah. Waṣiyyah referring to what? Bequestment, which means in English? You will, nah, but there's something specific about it. Who is eligible for it? To those that will not are not eligible to inherit. Naam. And then finally, inheritance. So those are the 5. So then, if we have look at those five categories, when we're discussing this debt here, which one would it fall into? The second? We have, again, Salafi and Shaykh. Some say the second, some say the third. Second and third now, we've got us. Which one? The second, the debt? Who said the third? You said the second and third. You said the third. No, it's the third. It is the third. Because if we're talking about the debts, the first of all, the debts are just generally outstanding debts. A person might have outstanding debts. They don't have any time appointed to it. He's just in debt. No, this happens to individuals. They have debts. These are the ones that are paid first, because they're outstanding. Naam. Then we have the third, which are anticipated debts. I'm referring to where they have a specific time. So there's a specific time for it to be paid. And of course, this is referring to the times that we live in, maybe bills and things like that. These companies, they'll still come after you after death. Allahumma. So then the bills are still needed then. And likewise as well, ongoing debts. So a debt that's been ascribed for a specific time. So then this is paid. And so what we understand from this barakallahu feekum is that it is not now something which is left where a person can say, because so-and-so has passed away, we can now seize his properties. If that debt now has been ascribed to a particular time. Naam. After that, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention, فإن أراد سفرا يحل قبل مدته أو الغزو تطوعا في غريمه منعه إلا أن يوفق بذلك. And so now we look at the scenario, we address the scenario where the individual, he intends to travel. Now he intends to travel. In this scenario, or he intends to travel for a particular purpose, or he intends to go for battle. In this particular scenario, barakallahu feekum, it is permissible to ask for that which you are owed at that particular time. So it's permissible to seek that which you're owed at that particular time. To the extent where it mentions that the one that goes for the battle, he is prevented, you can prevent him from traveling unless he gives assurances that he will pay this back. Naam, he gives assurances that he will pay it back. Thereafter it mentions, إن كان حالا على مؤسر وجب إنذاره. And so if now the individual has entered upon hardship, So he finds himself in a scenario where he's upon hardship. He's not able to pay back the debt. وَجَبَ إِنذَارُهُ. Becomes obligatory that you extend that time for that individual. Becomes obligatory that you extend the time of paying the debt for that individual. And then you look at now the ahkam of the sharia and the rahmah found within ahkam of the sharia for those that have hardship. And then you compare that to that which you find within the ahkam and the rulings of the kuffar. And what would be said now, for example, a person has a debt and now he says that I'm not able to pay it back. What's the kuffar? What is said? Pay back more. Now, not only do you still need to pay it back, but do you know what? Just for that trouble, you're going to have to pay back more. And if you don't pay that back, you have to pay back more than that as well. Now, and this is the reality. Some people will have a debt, for example, the debt could start off at £30 and accumulate to £3,000. Now, just because they're not able to pay it back at one particular time. And so this, no doubt, is a stark contrast between the two. And so when you hear, for example, questions and questions that we've discussed within these lessons, now, regarding contracts, where the contracts have late fees, and people say, are these late fees permissible? Of course, these contracts are not permissible, because within these contracts with late fees, then these are contracts that have the asl, the foundation of ribā within them. Now, they have the foundation of ribā within them, and this was the ribā of jahiliyyah. Now, ribā of jahiliyyah. So a person enters this contract, and what you find as well, people, they say, for example, they say that this particular contract is one where if you pay within 12 months, there's no ribā. Now, if you pay within 12 months, there's no ribā. You don't have to pay any interest. If you do not pay after those 12 months, then you have to pay interest. Now, but a person says, I'll be able to pay it within the 12 months. So he enters into that contract. Why is that not permissible? Two essential reasons. He's agreed to pay ribā. That's the first reason. He's agreed to pay ribā. That in of itself is haram. To agree to pay ribā is haram in of itself. Naam, because as we know, the la'an isn't just upon the one that takes the ribā, but it's upon the one that witnesses it, the one that writes down the contract even. So anyone that touches that ribā is just falling into the haram. That's one thing. Second, we've got a second, other than our friend here. No, nothing's guaranteed. So now, just because you are within, you have some degree of ease in the manner in which you're living, this doesn't mean that at that point in time, let's say in the 12 months, they say, that you're going to have that same circumstance. You're going to have that same circumstance. And so with that, we understand there's a clear difference between what is required for the Muslim and how the non-Muslim deals with these particular matters of the Dayn. Now, deals with these particular matters of the Dayn. And so Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention thereafter as well. When ادعى الإعصار خلف وخلي سبيله. And so if now an individual claims to be upon hardship, now he claims to be in this scenario and a situation of hardship, then it's asked that he swears in his half, he swears by Allah in relation to that being his situation, and then he's left. Now, meaning that he's given that extended time. Why? And as is mentioned, because the asl is the person is upon i'sar. So the asl is that the person is in the hardship. We don't look at the asl as that the person is able to pay it back. Now, why? Because of the fact he needed a loan in the first place. So the fact that he was in need of the loan in the first place is indicative of the fact that he is in hardship. So now we can't now say when it comes to the point of paying it back and he's saying, I'm still in hardship and I can't pay it back at this point in time. You can't now say that, no, we believe that you are, you have a better financial circumstance. Because you require the loan in the first place. Especially now after that as well, if he makes half, he swears by Allah. So he was clearly upon hardship due to the fact he required the loan. He swore by Allah. How could it now be said that no, we still need to, we're going to demand the money back now? Because it's clear. If Allah Ta'ala knows best, it's clear, and if the person is truthful, that this person is within that state of hardship. Now, within that state of hardship. And so, thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention though, إلا أن يعرف له مال قبل ذلك فلا يقبل قوله إلا ببينة. Except for in the scenario where it's known that he has money. It's known that he has money. Then his statement that he's not able to pay back due to hardship is not accepted unless there is bayinah, unless there's clear proof that this person is within hardship. Now, so the person has to present proof. So clear the two scenarios, barakallahu feekum. Now, the two people asking for a loan. What are the two scenarios? Repeat it. Now, you have one that asks for a loan, and you're just asking for a loan. Now, I'm just asking. So we take as an indication the fact that he's asking that he's in hardship. Now, thereafter, he says, I can't pay it back, I'm in hardship. The fact he asks, we understand he's in the hardship. Then he swears by Allah. So we accept that. And then what do we do in that scenario? Extend that loan period for him. Then we have the second individual. We ask for a loan, but however we know that he has money. So either he is known that he has wealth at the time of asking for a loan, so maybe the reason he's asking for a loan is not hardship, but it's just a matter of him organizing his money. Now, as people do, they organize their money in different ways, and sometimes take loans to do to do one thing for another. Now, or between the point of him taking that loan and the point where it needs to be paid back, it becomes clear he has money. Now, then what is done in this scenario? If he says when the point comes that he has to pay it back, what is done with this person? And he says, I can't pay it back, for example. He has to explain, he has to bring clear proof that he's not able to pay it back. Now, it's been clear proof that he's not able to pay it back. And so these are the two scenarios, barakallahu feekum. Thereafter, Qudāmah, he mentions, وإن كان موسرا لزمه وفاؤه. And so if now the person has wealth and he has the ability to pay it back, it's an obligation upon him to pay it back. Now it's an obligation upon him to pay it back. And then he goes on to mention, فإن أبى, if he refuses, حبس حتى يوفيه. He's imprisoned until he pays it back. Now, he's in prison until he pays it back. So this is in relation to the individuals that are due to pay back the Dayn, the debt, and the appointed time has come for them to pay it back. Now, who can repeat the different categories of people so far? Now.
The person who took a debt because he was in hardship,
Mm-hmm.
and he couldn't pay the debt back, so he swore by Allah that he can't. He's left alone and he's given an extension.
That's the first one. Now, second.
The person who took a debt, it was known he had.
So the first one again, the person who took a debt due to hardship, when it comes to pay it back, he says he can't pay it back, right? And it's accepted from him. He swears by Allah and it's accepted from him. Now.
The second one took a loan, but it was known he had money at the time. And then when it's time to pay the loan, he says he doesn't have money, so he has to clarify the situation.
The second one, he took the loan and it's known he had money at the time, or
within the time period that he had the debt, it becomes clear that he had.
with the time period that he owed the money, it becomes clear that he has money. He has money to pay back the debt. Now, and then when the time period comes, he has to pay it back. He says, "I can't pay it back." Now, what's upon him? He said, he has to clarify. It's been proved that he's not able to pay it back. Then we now mention our third.
He refuses to pay it back, so he's in prison.
So now this is a person. It could be the second person, to be fair, or it could just be one that is clearly has the money. He doesn't even say I can't pay it back. He just says I won't pay it back. No, so he refuses to pay it back. Then this person is imprisoned, as we mentioned, until he fulfills now the payment of that. Now, and so then it mentions this matter of what we're going to mention now, which is al-ḥajr. Naam, al-ḥajr. Before we mention this here, in relation to al-ḥajr, in relation to the debt, ḥajr can occur from different means. Naam. So because we're discussing the debts, this is how it's been explained, this category of it. But there's another one which we want to discuss now, where an individual has money. However, it's now been established that they are irresponsible with their money. Now, they're irresponsible with their money. So now it's established with the hakim, the qadi, the judge, that so-and-so is irresponsible with the money. Then it is taken out of their responsibility and given to them in increments. Now, the money is given to them in increments so that they spend it in a manner which is responsible. Now, so an individual, so this doesn't now mean, for example, a person is a safīh, or the person is غير عاقل, يعني مجنون. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that the person is a child. So he isn't baligh. Nor does it mean that the person is not regarded as being of sound intellect. Meaning that this same person is upon him to pray. Naam, it's upon him to fast. The ahkam of deen are upon him. However, when it comes to mal, when it comes to wealth, he's extremely irresponsible with it. And that could be due to many different reasons. Naam, it could be due to bad tarbiyah. It could be due to bad the way money is cultivated. It could be due to some form of deficiency. Naam. Safīh. Exactly. So the individual is regarded as being a safīh, yani a heedless or foolish individual. So there's a genuine deficiency that the person has. However, it doesn't now mean that the safīh, for example, doesn't pray. Naam. Or the person with tarbiyah sayyah doesn't fast. They still need to do these actions. But because of the fact that the way they are with money is to their detriment, then their money is withheld from them. And it's only given to them the amount that's given to them is only the amount that they need to fulfill their needs. Now, the money that's given to them is the amount which is the amount that helps them fulfill their needs. That's it. and they're not given the full amount. Is that clear, barakallahu feekum? So this is one matter of hajr. Second is in relation to the debts which we're discussing today. Now, in relation to the debts, where now an individual in kana مال لا يفي دينه بدينه كله. And so the individual does not have the amount that will pay back the full debt. So essentially, what is being described here is what? So what you owe is more than what you have. What's been described here? Quite simply what? Not a debt. What is his hal? It could be fakir, naam, but what else? Bankruptcy. Naam. So what we're describing here now is the debt of the muflis, the one that's bankrupt. Naam. So when we're saying the one that's bankrupt, essentially what you owe is more than what you have. Now what you owe is what is more than what you have. And then this is what we mean by bankruptcy in terms of ahkam and deen, sharia. And of course, when the muflis is described in the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it can also be understood in the same manner. Why? Because what did he alayhi salatu wasallam describe the muflis as in the narration? The bankrupt individual. يتم الأعمال و ظلم هذا فما هي العقوبة وعاقبته ماذا؟ أيوة قبل ذلك يعني يؤخذ من نعم هكذا يعني that the individual that was يعني the muflis, the bankrupt individual, is that he comes for reckoning يوم القيامة. However, he has oppressed this one and he's spoken ill of this one. He's backbiting that one. Naam. And so what happens is that as he's taken from the rights of the people, they take from his hasanat. To the extent there's nothing left from the hasanat to take from. Naam. So then now he takes on the sayyi'at of the others, the evil deeds of the others. Now this is the individual's muflis. Why? Because now he has essentially, by way of his debts, what are his debts? Are his dhulm and nas, taken from the rights of the people. These are his debts. But what his debts are more than what he owes, or what he has rather. So what he owes is more than what he has from his hasanat, from his good deeds. Because he owes all of these people. To the extent that because he owes all of these people, it overcomes that, and then he has to he has to take from their sayyi'at, wa iyadhu billah. And so, when we're discussing the one that's muflis here, then of course we're referring to the one that owes more than he has. He owes more than he has. And so, with that, now with this, then the person, the debtor, is able to seek from the hakim that the person's wealth is seized. Naam. The person's wealth is seized. And Ibn Qudāmah mentions here, يعني لزمه إجابتهم. And Ibn Qudāmah mentions that it's obligatory, it's incumbent upon the hakim, the judge, to accept that request. So not only, as long as that request is made, then that request is accepted. Naam. The proof that is used for this is a narration of Ka'b ibn Malik Ka'b ibn Malik, where it mentions that this was the action that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did with Mu'adh, and thus he sold some of his belongings, his wealth. However, this narration, which is found in the Sunan al-Kubra of Bayhaqi, is regarded as being da'if. It's a da'if narration. And so it would not now be said that this is the nas, this is the text that can be used to prove that. However, essentially the general matter of returning people's rights back to them would mean now that this is something which is at the discretion of the hakim. And we wouldn't necessarily say that it's an obligation of the hakim. Now, an obligation upon the hakim, upon the qadi. Because if we say it's an obligation, then of course we are saying that if he does not fulfill that, for athim, if he does not fulfill that, then he is blameworthy. However, of course, it is at his discretion, and it's for him to find a solution so that the person's wealth is returned to him. And so this is what is sought from the debtor. I buy the debtor from the hakim. Now this is sought from the debtor, from the judge. And then Qudāmah goes on to mention in this scenario, فإذا حجر عليه لم يجوز تصرفه في ماله. So now if the judge places that restriction upon him, then it's not permissible for him. It's not permissible for him now to spend from his own wealth. It's not permissible for him to spend from his own wealth. Meaning, he cannot now use that money, and he cannot now sell from his wealth. So, for example, let's say, he has land. He cannot now sell that land and benefit from it. Now, why? Because he has all these debts. Nor can he gift it. Nor can he give it as waqf. Use it as something which is given now as a means of charity. Why? Because the hakim has established that this wealth, the person cannot now use this wealth until he's paid back these debts. Now, does that make sense, Barakallahu Feekum? So, of course, when a person is restricted by the hakim, it doesn't now mean that he cannot use the money for his needs. So if he has needs, for example, food, clothing, he needs to pay for his housing, his general living expenses, he can pay for that. Anything outside of that where he seeks to benefit from that wealth, then he's not able to do so. He's not able to do so. And so, the hakim is also placed in, is given the responsibility in order to help pay back the debt. ad-Dayn. Meaning, the property of this individual is placed into his responsibility, and he may sell from it. He may sell from it. So let's say, for example, because now we're talking about property, you have to use bigger numbers than 1,000, I guess. Let's say, for example, a person owes £1 million, and he has one property which is worth 300,000, and he has another property which is worth 400,000. Now all he has is these two properties, and he has maybe some cash. The hakim will seize the property and sell it. Seize the property and sell it. What does he now do with that wealth? Uses it to pay off some of the debts. And he takes a portion of it for the person's needs. So the hakim now is the one in charge of the person's property. So he takes a portion of it for his needs, and the rest of it is used to pay off those debts. Now, and the rest is used to pay off the debts. Now, so then he goes on to mention ويبدأ بمن له عرش جناية من رقيقه فيدفع إلى مجني عليه أقل الأمرين. Now, so he begins by paying it back. The first thing that needs to be paid back is the blood money of the one that he owns. Referring to, of course, the slave. So I don't think this is an issue that anyone has in Cheetham Hill. But what is referring to is the fact that the person with the slave, if the slave, for example, kills another individual, the responsibility of that blood money is not upon the slave. Why? He has no money. The fact that he is a slave means that anything that was regarded as his wealth is the wealth of the one who owns him. So now it cannot now be said that you have to pay the blood money. Of course not. Rather, that blood money has to be paid by the one that owns him. And so this is the first thing that is paid. Now this is the first thing that is paid. And they pay the lesser of the two, whether it is the blood money, whether it comes up to the blood money, or the value of the person themselves, the slave themselves. Now, then من كان له الرهن فيدفع إليه أقل الأمرين من الدين أو ثمنه، يعني ثمن الرهن. So then when it comes to the dayn, the debt itself, the first thing, of course, we mentioned is the blood money of the one that the person owns. Then it comes down to the rahan. We'll discuss the rahan further later on, inshallah, which is the collateral. Some refer to it as even using the word mortgage, but what is better is the word collateral. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Where essentially the debt is placed against another commodity. And this is generally how people would loan money. To the extent you see people loan money like this now. People on a grander scale, they loan money like this now. However, the issue, the way that they loan money now is what? Quite simply, ribā. Is that they will place collateral within these things and take a debt off against another commodity, but then there is a ribā within those transactions. There's no harm with collateral. For example, a person says, I'm going to lend you this money, and in the event that this debt is not paid back, then you take commodity kada. For example, you take the car. Now, there's no harm in that. And what's the benefit in that, rather? What's the benefit in doing that? If this person dies, now something else as well. What's the benefit if you place the rahan? Yakuma.
There's no fitna between the people.
No fitna.
There's a guarantee.
It gives you greater assurances. So the person that loans, both people benefit now. Why? Because the person loans has greater assurances that he's going to receive something back, inshallah. And the one that is the debtor, the one that's taken a loan, receives the money, receives that thing that he's loaning. So everyone benefits from this. And so it aids or allows for that debt to be made stronger. But now, of course, this is done where there is no ribā involved, of course. So now, if the person has the dayn, And so now, if the person, we're still referring to the individual where the hakim is taking charge of the person's debts. Now, the judge is taking charge of the person's debts. Then now he pays back one of the two. The aqall al-amrayn. So he pays back the amount of the debt or the amount of the collateral. Or he gives the collateral. Now, so now, for example, say a person's got all of these debts, and upon some of these debts also is some collateral. Then the hakim looks at that particular debt, that particular transaction and dealing, and then now he would make the judgment. Is it the debt that he pays back, the money, for example, or is it the commodity, the collateral? And how does he make the choice between the two?
Whichever one is cheaper.
Less, yeah. So the aqall amrin. Naam. And so then it goes on to mention ثم من وجد متاعه الذي باعه بعينه. And so if now, for example, it is you have a commodity that the person is due to sell or trying to sell specifically, then it goes to the creditor. The judge gives it to the creditor. So let's say, for example, a person's got all of these debts, and now he's trying to sell his house. Now, then the house is given to the creditor. The judge transfers it to the creditor because he has greater right to it. Now, he has greater right to it. Is that clear, Barakallahu Feek? Now, he has greater right to that particular thing. And this is in relation to, if this particular thing is not damaged or doesn't have any form of damage to it. However, the judge takes from whatever is due to it. Now I'm due from it. He doesn't take any increase at the creditor. And this is due to the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَجْدَ مَتَاعَهُ بِعَيْنِهِ عِنْدَ إِنسَانٍ قَدْ أَفْلَسَ فَهُوَ أَحَقٌّ بِهِ. So whoever comes across the commodity, specific commodity of the individual that has gone bankrupt, then he has more right to it. Referring to the creditor. The creditor. This hadith which is muttafaqan alayh. Now, thereafter, it mentions as well, وَيُنْفِقْ عَلَى مُفْلِسٍ وَلَا مَنْ تَلْزَمُهُ مؤنته من ماله إلى أن وجب له حق. So thereafter, as we mentioned previously, the hakim spends upon the muflis. He spends in his needs, so that which is obligatory upon him. And likewise, he spends from those that is obligatory for the muflis to spend on. So this person is muflis, he's an individual that is bankrupt. So he spends on his needs. And also he may have this is mentioned, responsibilities. So for example, he has children, he has a wife, he has children. He has to spend upon. The judge takes this all into consideration. So he seizes his wealth and his property, and he takes it all into consideration. Now, again, this now is indicative of the mercy, the rahmah found within the deen of Islam. And the rahmah of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated. Because again, لو تقارنه, if you now compare it to bankruptcy in lands such as these. What is bankruptcy in lands such as these understood to be? You could say that. I wouldn't, but you could. What is it regarded to be? If you're someone bankrupt here, you have absolutely nothing. Nah, you have absolutely nothing. Where to the extent where it's like, how do you spend upon your own needs? That's your own problem. Now, how do you pay for your bills and you pay for your food and whatever else? They would be like, it's something for you to work out. To work that all out by yourself, you shouldn't have been bankrupt in the first place. However, the Hakim, Muslim, and Qadi, Muslim, what does he do? He establishes what the debt is, and he establishes what are the needs that the person needs to pay for not only just himself, but those that he's responsible for as well. So then he takes that into consideration and then pays back the creditors as well upon that. And so this is how this matter of hajr occurs amongst the believers. So we mentioned hajr being of how many types? 2. The first,
person is in need and he takes a loan and he can't pay it, so he swears by Allah because he's given an extension.
that's not the hajr. It's 2 types of hajr. The one that's the safīh, so the one that's regarded as being a foolish individual. And so thus, because of their foolish nature, what does it mean? How do they act? Irresponsible with the wealth. They're irresponsible with their wealth. So what is done? So the judge does, before doing that, sees his wealth and gives from it in increments what he needs. Now, that's the first. The second, no. So whoever has a debt, however, what he owes is what? What he owes is greater than what he has. Then what is done here? So his wealth is seized and his money is taken and done what with? Pay some of the debts and give some, and basically pay the debt and use some of it to pay for his needs. Now, what is paid first? The diya, no. Of who? The slave. Then if he has no money, there's no waratha. What's there to inherit?
كان مثلا عندها
صح عليهم الدفاع.
مثلا واحد مات وعنده نقول عقار مثلا.
فعليه نعم، يعني من يرث قد يكون يرث الدين، والله المستعان. صح، لكن هذا ما هو. That's not the one who was looking for. Not the.
لا المقصد السؤال.
لا بأس.
يعني مثلا
بس تعليق.
لو أحد مات.
نعم.
وعنده عقار أو مال منقول، كان أو وصول مثلا بيت، والبيت هذا يذهب إلى الورثة، ولكن هل يستقطع منه الدين، يعني يوفى دينه قبل أن قبل ما يعطى الورثة؟
أيوة، لأنه هو المال الميتة الذي مات ماله ينقسم إلى أقسام، ذكرنا 5 أقسام، لكن هذه 5 أقسام على ترتيب أيضا. الدين أو من أول شيء
يستوفى دين.
لا، أول شيء جنازة. نعم، أول شيء يدفع للجنازة كل ما قيمة الجنازة. بعد ذلك الدين. بعد ذلك الدين في الذمة، ثم وصية، ثم الورثة. نعم. The brother was asking if the person has money, or he has, for example, a homes or property, but he has debt, what is done with that property? Is it a case that he has to pay back the debt first? I mean, as we mentioned there's 5 categories that the person pays back, or the 5 categories that are done with the person's wealth. And we mentioned that these categories are upon yani tartib. There's an order.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. هيا على الصلاة. هيا على الصلاة. هيا على الفلاح. هيا على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Now, so we mentioned those 5 categories. The 5 categories of things that are done with the wealth of the deceased, and they're in order. Now, they have to be in order. The first is that we mentioned is what? You pay for the janazah. Second, the debts, yani the dayn. The third, the third, al-dayn fi dhimma, yani the upcoming debts, the debts that are going to come up. Fourth is the waṣiyyah, and the 5th, inheritance, ورثة. So الورثة آخر شيء. يعني بعد كل شيء الورثة. نعم. والله أعلم. لا، الوصية غير. الوصية لكل من لم يرث. مثل ذلك، يعني كل من لم يرث فله يعني يدخل في الوصية.
يعني واحد ما يقدرش مثلا يوصي بأنه في الأصل وارث.
كيف؟
يعني واحد ما يقدرش يكتب في الوصية لأحد وفي الأصل هو وارث.
في الأصل من لم يرث. مثلا أنت عندكم مليار. إن شاء الله عندك مليار. إن شاء الله إن شاء الله. وتقول خلاص يعني من حيث الوصية أعطيه نصف ذلك إلى عبد الحكيم، عشان عبد الحكيم ليس من لم يرث مني. نعم، ليس من ورثة، فلا تنسانا.
إن شاء الله.
No. So it was mentioned in relation to the waṣiyyah that this is the one that inherits. So to the one that is left, bequeathed a particular amount. So meaning that this is the one that does not inherit by way of what is mentioned within the ayat and the nusus. So not the family members essentially, or anyone that inherits from by way of that which is mentioned within the text, and that up to a third of the wealth is left to them. So I mentioned to our brother that inshallah he has £1 billion, and he decides to leave half of it to a brother called Abdul Hakeem. Naam. No, instead, make sure there's a lot of Abdul Hakeem. Make sure you mention the whole name. Because I'm not someone that will inherit from him, then he can say that he's going to leave a degree of that money. Naam. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now, and so this is essentially what we wanted to discuss today in relation to the ahkam of the duyun. Barakallahu feekum. Wa jazakum Allahu khayra. And inshallah, the next few lessons, we'll still be discussing the dayn, the duyun, but things that are attached to the duyun. As we mentioned slightly today, the rahim, the collateral. So we'll mention further the collateral and the ahkam in relation to the collateral as well. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Jazakum Allah khayra. Barakallahu feekum. وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاكم الله خير.